On January 31, 1921, at 6:30, the keeper of the Cape Hatteras life-saving station in North Carolina recorded in the official logbook the appearance of a large five-masted sailing vessel on the outer reef of Diamond Shoals. This document, registered under number 104 in the archives of the 4th District of the U.S. Coast Guard, initiated a large-scale interagency investigation, which went down in history as an example of complex coordination between government structures. The sailing ship was stuck on a sandbar with all sails raised, showing a lack of control and signs of life on deck. Before we proceed to a detailed reconstruction of this case based on archival reports, interrogation transcripts, and financial records, subscribe to the channel to support the development of the project dedicated to the rigorous analysis of historical conspiracies and mysteries based on documentary evidence. To understand the nature of the event, an institutional audit of the American maritime industry in the period after the end of World War I, specifically in 1920 and 1921, is necessary. The U.S. Merchant Marine was experiencing a structural crisis caused by falling rates for international cargo shipments. The schooner was built in 1919 at the shipyard of the G.G. Deering Company in the city of Bath, Maine. It was a vessel with a displacement of 2,110 tons, 78 meters long, 15 meters wide, designed for transporting bulk cargo. The financial books of the shipowners for 1920, seized during a tax audit, show that the cost of maintaining such a wooden sailing ship in conditions of competition with steam vessels made its operation almost unprofitable. The vessel was insured with 3 independent syndicates for a total of $200,000, which, according to expert assessments from the Department of Commerce dated March 12, 1921, exceeded its actual liquid value by approximately 35%. This commercial imbalance initially cast doubt on the financial integrity of the final voyage. The voyage began in August 1920, when the vessel took on a cargo of 2,100 tons of coal in the port of Newport News for delivery to Rio de Janeiro. From the very beginning, administrative documents record disruptions in the crew. On August 19, 1920, while anchored in the Delaware Bay, the original captain, William Merritt, was officially declared incapacitated due to a serious illness, confirmed by a report from the port physician. His son, who held the position of first mate, left the ship with him. Amid a shortage of licensed personnel, exacerbated by the 1920 strike of the International Seamen's Union, the company urgently hired 66-year-old Captain Willis Wormel, who had a 40-year record of impeccable service. However, Charles McClellan was approved for the position of first mate. His personal file in the Department of Commerce registry contained information about 3 disciplinary penalties for insubordination. The rest of the crew consisted of 2 officers and 8 sailors, with all the sailors being subjects of Denmark, which created a social and linguistic isolation between the command staff and the subordinates. The sailors' union record card indicated their participation in the strike movement in European ports in 1918 to 1919, which heightened counterintelligence suspicions. The documentary chronology of the vessel's movement shows that the passage to South America took 44 days. The sailing ship arrived in Rio de Janeiro on October 6, 1920. Customs manifests and port receipts record that the unloading of coal was prolonged for 22 days due to a strike by local dock workers. During this period, a deterioration of discipline within the ship's crew was recorded. Captain Wormel maintained regular official correspondence with the company's central office in Maine. In a report dated November 12, 1920, he reported the systematic consumption of alcoholic beverages by First Mate McClellan, together with sailors in coastal establishments of Rio de Janeiro. Financial statements record that McClellan requested an advance of $250 from the ship's cash, citing personal needs. However, an audit revealed that these funds were spent in gambling houses. Captain Wormel issued an official reprimand to McClellan, which was entered into the rough logbook under the date of November 15, 1920, serving as a catalyst for further open confrontation among the officers. After completing commercial operations in Brazil, the vessel departed on its return voyage in ballast on December 2, 1920. The route included a call at the island of Barbados to receive further navigation and commercial instructions from the shipowner. The sailing ship anchored in the roadstead of Bridgetown on January 9, 1921. On the same day, an event documented in the archives of the British Colonial Police occurred. First Mate McClellan, while heavily intoxicated in a port bar, started a brawl and was arrested by the local authorities. During a search, a .38 caliber revolver was confiscated from him. During interrogation, the transcript of which, numbered 45, was subsequently handed over to American investigators, McClellan openly threatened Captain Wormel, stating his intention to physically subdue the captain before the ship returned to the USA. U.S. Consul Carl Myers, in a report dated January 11, 1921, noted that there were no available American citizens with a navigator's license in the port of Bridgetown, and the law prohibited replacing an officer with a foreign national in coastwise trade. As a result, the consul persuaded Wormel to take McClellan back on board, paying a bail of £50 sterling from the company's funds. This administrative decision highlighted the inability of state institutions to prevent an internal mutiny on the vessel. The schooner left Barbados on January 10, 1921. Over the next 19 days, the vessel proceeded along the U.S. coast without establishing radio contact, as wooden sailing ships of this class were not equipped with radio telegraph installations. Verified sighting of the vessel occurred on January 29, 1921, at 16:30. The keeper of the Cape Lookout lightship, Thomas Jacobson, made an entry in the logbook about the passage of a five-masted sailing ship 2 miles from the lightship. According to Jacobson's written testimony, the sailing ship was moving under reduced sail, performing illogical maneuvers in an area of strong coastal current. A man, whom Jacobson described as tall, with red hair and speaking with a strong European accent, shouted from the ship's deck through a handheld megaphone. This man reported that the schooner had lost both its anchors during a severe storm at Cape Fear and demanded that this information be relayed to the office of the G.G. Deering Company. Jacobson recorded that Captain Wormel, whose anthropometric data and command style were well known to the keeper from previous voyages, was absent from the bridge. This document confirms that by January 29, 1921, the legitimate hierarchy on board had been completely destroyed, and control of the vessel had passed to individuals without legal authority. On January 31, 1921, at 6:30, the sailing ship was found aground on Diamond Shoals. Due to extremely unfavorable weather conditions, a storm of 8 to 9 on the Beaufort scale and high surf, U.S. Coast Guard rescue vessels were unable to approach the object for 4 days. The first successful boarding took place on February 4, 1921, under the direction of Captain Brady of the rescue vessel. The inspection report he compiled on February 4, 1921, contains a detailed inventory list of the schooner's material condition. The vessel had been completely abandoned. All lifeboats were missing, with the tackle ropes neatly cut with a knife, indicating an absence of panic and a systematic launching of the craft into the water. In the galley, prepared food was found on the stove, laid out on plates for 11 portions, which, by the time of the inspection, had completely frozen over. In Captain Wormel's cabin, investigators recorded disorder. The locks on the desk drawers had been broken. The ship's safe was open and cleared of cash. Navigation charts for that specific sector of the coast, the chronometer, sextant, and all 3 copies of the ship's log were missing. At the same time, the sailors' personal belongings, including their dress uniforms, money chests, and identity documents, remained in the forecastle, ruling out a theory of a chaotic escape during sinking. The complete absence of signs of struggle, damage from firearms or bladed weapons on the wooden structures of the deck and bulkheads allowed the investigation to rule out a theory of a sudden external attack by traditional pirate groups. To investigate the incident, which caused concerns in government circles, a joint committee was formed in March 1921, comprising representatives from 4 federal ministries. Operational leadership of the investigation was assumed by the Deputy Director of the Bureau of Investigation, Edgar Hoover. A multi-volume case file, indexed as 40-621, was compiled in the agency's archives, containing a detailed analysis of 3 main theories. The first analytical model linked the crew's demise to the activities of smuggling syndicates during the Prohibition era. The Volstead Act of 1919 had turned the delivery of illegal alcohol into a super-profitable business, with margins of up to 400%. Bureau of Investigation agents conducted a detailed audit of First Mate McClellan's connections in the ports of New York and Baltimore. It was established that McClellan had debt obligations to a criminal syndicate amounting to $1,500. The operational hypothesis suggested that McClellan and the Danish sailors eliminated Captain Wormel to change the ship's route and turn it into a floating warehouse for contraband alcohol in neutral waters. This was supported by testimony from Barbadian port officials, who recorded the loading of 40 crates of unaccounted cargo disguised as technical supplies. The second analytical model, developed by experts from the Department of Commerce, considered the version of an external criminal structure or piracy. The department's official report of June 21, 1921, provided a registry of 12 merchant ships that had gone missing or were found abandoned in the Atlantic over the previous 18 months. The largest among them was the steamship Hewitt, which had disappeared in the same area in January 1921. Investigators postulated the existence of an organized international pirate group using high-speed steam vessels to intercept schooners, fully confiscate personal property, and subsequently deprive all crew members of life to eliminate witnesses. However, a detailed technical audit of the sailing ship's holds, completed on February 12, 1921, showed that all ballast and internal structures remained untouched, and there was no damage to the hull plating. This forced the investigation to acknowledge the economic impracticality of the external attack theory, as the wooden vessel itself, without registration documents, had no market value on the legal freight market. The third analytical model, championed by the State Department, had a pronounced geopolitical character and reflected the realities of the Red Scare that had gripped the United States in 1919 to 1921. Counterintelligence services investigated the involvement of radical cells of anarchists and communists operating within the International Seamen's Union. A secret memorandum dated May 5, 1921, indicated that Danish sailors might have been involved in a plot to seize American vessels to destabilize U.S. trade logistics, or to subsequently use the sailing ships to transport political activists to European ports. Federal agents conducted searches in 47 port union organizations from Maine to Florida, interrogating over 300 sailors of foreign origin. No direct material evidence confirming the existence of an organized political network on board was found. However, these operations recorded a high level of class solidarity among the rank-and-file sailors, with McClellan, who had been arrested in Barbados, confirming their readiness to physically suppress officers while isolated on the open sea. Source criticism and textual analysis of documents are central to the deconstruction of the criminal case materials, revealing facts of deliberate disinformation. On April 11, 1921, a resident of coastal Dare County named Christopher Columbus Gray presented a glass bottle to the local Coast Guard station. Inside was a note written in pencil on a sheet of paper measuring 10 by 15 centimeters. The message stated that the schooner had been captured by an unknown diesel submarine, and the entire crew had been shackled and transported to a secret base. The document was signed with the surname M. Selby. This artifact caused significant public outcry and prompted the U.S. Navy to dispatch 3 destroyers to patrol the coastal area. However, the Bureau of Investigation conducted a thorough paleographic examination of the document. Specialists from the U.S. Government Printing Office compared the handwriting on the note with samples of letters from all 11 crew members seized from Customs archives. The expert report, dated May 28, 1921, stated an absolute mismatch in the graphic characteristics of the letters, slant, and pressure. Chemical analysis of the paper established that this type of wrapping material was used exclusively in the retail trade network of Dare County. Under cross-examination on June 3, 1921, Christopher Gray, pressured by the evidence, confessed that he had personally fabricated the note and thrown the bottle into the surf with the aim of creating a sensation that would allow him to obtain a salaried position as a keeper at a rescue station. This episode demonstrates how grassroots sources created false information noise that diverted the investigation from analyzing the real institutional causes of the disaster. Contradictions in the testimonies of officials also indicate attempts to conceal systemic failures in the state management apparatus. The keeper of the lightship, Thomas Jacobson, during his first interrogation on February 2, 1921, claimed that the schooner was in sound technical condition and following a standard trajectory. However, after the Department of Justice initiated an internal investigation into the delayed transmission of information, Jacobson changed his testimony. In the protocol dated February 15, 1921, he described in detail signs of chaos on the deck of the sailing ship, noting that the sailors were moving about the deck in a disorderly manner, and the sails were secured in violation of elementary maritime rules. A textual comparison of these two protocols shows that the change in the witness's rhetoric was motivated by a desire to avoid dismissal for negligence. The delay between the visual sighting of the suspicious vessel and the dispatch of a radio telegraph to the district headquarters was 36 hours, which eliminated any possibility of the Coast Guard intercepting the schooner before it ran aground. Similar distortions were found during the audit of testimonies from the management of the G.G. Deering Company. The company's director, Harry Deering, stated under oath in March 1921 that the enterprise was in a sound financial position and that the voyage to Rio de Janeiro was part of a long-term commercial strategy. However, the financial inspection completed by the tax authorities in July 1921 revealed the company's hidden accounts payable to Boston banks in the amount of $85,000, the repayment deadline for which expired on February 15, 1921. Thus, the vessel's demise and the subsequent receipt of an insurance payment of $200,000 were the only way to save the company from bankruptcy. This fact points to a motive for organizing deliberate sabotage by the owners, who could have instructed the first mate, McClellan, on the necessity of destroying the vessel on the reefs of Cape Hatteras for financial gain. The administrative conflict between the Treasury Department and the Department of Justice was also reflected in the documents. The meeting minutes from April 14 and 16, 1921, demonstrate disagreements regarding jurisdiction over the investigation. Treasury Department representatives insisted that the incident should be classified as a navigational disaster caused by force majeure weather conditions, which would allow the case to be closed without involving criminal investigation resources. At the same time, analysts from the Bureau of Investigation under Hoover's leadership categorically objected, pointing out that the seizure of the ship's documents and charts indicated the covering up of traces of a crime committed in neutral waters. The conflict led to evidence being collected in parallel, with Treasury Department structures delaying the transfer of declarations to justice investigators by 22 days, which slowed down the verification of smuggling theories. The technical reconstruction of the incident's final phase allows for the construction of a probable sequence of events based on logistical and hydrometeorological data. Between January 27 and 29, 1921, in the Cape Fear area, the schooner entered the zone of a powerful atmospheric front with wind speeds exceeding 25 meters per second. Under these conditions, the final breakdown of the command structure occurred on board. It is likely that McClellan and the sailors loyal to him physically subdued Captain Wormell and the engineer, isolating or eliminating them, as evidenced by the captain's absence on the bridge during the passage of Cape Lookout Lighthouse on January 29, 1921. However, the conspirators faced a structural problem. None of the rank-and-file crew possessed the qualifications to perform precise navigational calculations in storm conditions, and in the absence of 2 anchors, which had been lost due to improper maneuvering. The sailing vessel found itself in a state of uncontrolled drift under the influence of the strong Gulf Stream current. Realizing the inevitability of the ship's destruction on the Diamond Shoals reefs, the conspirators decided to evacuate. The orderly manner in which the lifeboat ropes were cut and the prepared rations in the galley indicate that the crew abandoned the schooner in relatively calm conditions, immediately before or after grounding, expecting to reach the shore, which was less than 10 miles away. However, hydrographic reports for January 30th and 31st, 1921, record a change in wind direction and an increase in surf waves in the shoal area. The schooner's life-saving equipment, consisting of open wooden boats, lacked sufficient stability. The loss of the entire crew's lives occurred as a result of these boats capsizing in the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. This logistical model is confirmed by the report of the steamship Carolina's captain, dated March 14, 1921, which recorded a half-submerged boat with the G.G. Deering Company brand and remnants of navigational equipment belonging to the schooner, 50 miles northeast of Cape Hatteras. Fragments of First Mate McClellan's clothing recovered from the boat definitively confirmed that the evacuation was total. The documentary epilogue of this large-scale investigation was formalized at the end of 1921, when all agencies prepared their final reports for the U.S. Cabinet. Due to the absence of living witnesses and defendants, cases against specific individuals were closed with the wording, due to the impossibility of establishing personal responsibility. In March 1921, the Coast Guard Engineering Commission concluded that extracting the schooner from the Diamond Shoals shallows was technically impossible, and the hull itself posed a navigational hazard to coastal shipping. Based on a circular from the Treasury Department dated March 14, 1921, the remains of the wooden sailing vessel were blown up using 4 charges of dynamite with a total weight of 350 kilograms. Material assets, including rigging elements and kitchen equipment, were auctioned off in Norfolk on April 22, 1921. According to the financial report of the customs inspector, the total proceeds from the sale of the property amounted to $412.50, which were used to cover the Coast Guard's expenses. The investigation archive, comprising 1,200 pages of documents, including intelligence summaries from the Bureau of Investigation and encrypted telegrams from the State Department, was transferred for permanent storage to the National Archives and Records Administration under registration code 40-621, access to which was restricted for 50 years. The influence of this incident on the U.S. legal and administrative system proved to be long-term and led to the modernization of methods of state control over maritime space. In October 1921, the U.S. Congress, based on analytical notes from the Joint Committee, approved amendments to the federal law on maritime safety. According to the new regulations, all commercial vessels with a displacement exceeding 1,000 tons engaged in international and coastal voyages were required to have permanently functioning radio telegraph stations on board with a range of at least 150 miles, which eliminated the problem of informational isolation of sailing vessels. Furthermore, the Department of Labor introduced mandatory fingerprinting and anthropometric registration of foreign citizens upon their hiring onto vessels under the U.S. flag, which significantly complicated the infiltration of criminal and radical elements into the merchant marine structure. The coordination protocols developed by Edgar Hoover for the interaction of the Coast Guard, Customs, and the Bureau of Investigation during this case formed the basis for the creation of permanent interagency task forces, which, throughout the 1920s, systematically countered flotillas of smugglers during the Prohibition era, turning methods of legal document auditing into a tool of state security.